We do not know what our chances of survival are, so we fight as if they were zero. We do not know what we are facing, so we fight as if it was the dark gods themselves. No one will remember us now, and we may never be buried beneath Titan. So we will build our own memorial here. The chapter might lose us, and the Imperium might never know we existed. But the enemy will know.
If I had the mental fortitude to take on just one more artistic hobby in my life, it would be painting miniatures and playing the tabletop war games associated with that. I'm actually very familiar with the Warhammer IP through mostly the actually amazing video games like Vermintide and 40K Space Marine. I really enjoyed those games. From the absolutely badass character archetypes to the crazy environments and the insanely deep lore. So naturally, as someone that loves to paint and make miniature things, I have always had a very deep interest in painting the miniatures. Be it Warhammer 40K or Age of Sigmar, and as someone who has always loved board games and real-time strategy games and a good old-fashioned group gaming session, the idea of painting and customizing a fleet of models coupled with the social aspect of pitting those models against someone else's squad of customized miniatures has always been really enticing to me. But alas, that would require free time and, well, friends. So today I'm going to be living out one of my gaming fantasies. Not that one. I'm Danny Peralta. This is Diver Girl Art. That's right, folks. Today we're painting Warhammer miniatures, along with making an unlikely landscape for them to find themselves in. That being said, enough with the yapping. Let's get to it. Well, let's get building, shall we? Since I have never painted a Warhammer model, and there's like a billion different models out there, I figured what better place to start than a good old-fashioned Space Marine. So I got this little starter set. The set comes with 3 models, also some paint and a starter brush. I have always loved Games Workshop models, and I have such a high level of respect for the unnamed sculptors behind the creation of these little plastic works of art. The same goes for the artists that paint them to such a high level. They seem to approach things with such a deep and comprehensive understanding of lighting and values. That being said, that's not what's happening here today, so get that out of your head. This is just an experiment. We're just having a good time here. Considering I have never painted a Warhammer model in my life, and I'm making a diorama and kit bashing a creature for them to face off against, and I actually wanted to get this video edited and out in a reasonable time, I will be revisiting the topic of Warhammer on the channel and giving the whole mini painting thing a more in-depth attempt. So be on the lookout for that. But for now, let's just focus on having some fun and making something cool. Now that we have them all together and cleaned up, let's get them primed. I hit them with a rattle can primer, creating a zenithal with black all over and gray from above. Now let's move on to kit bashing a giant creature that these Space Marines will encounter. Starting out with a very cheap bag of small dinosaur toys, I'll start by cutting and fitting random dinosaur parts together like a mad scientist employed by Jurassic Park to try and stitch together the perfect predator.
Yeah, don't you see the danger, John, inherent in what you're doing here? Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun.
Of course, this monster will inevitably escape and wreak havoc on the staff at a later date. We'll cross that bridge, as they say. But for now...
Money!
I did sculpt a head already, but I decided to change it, bulk it up a bit. Of course, I keep its horn, which is just a piece cut from one of its cousin's tail. Next, I'll fashion an outer rib cage on either side of it using some binding coil. I also made this layered carapace back using some EVA foam. Now it's time for priming, same method as the Space Marines. Now let's move on to the base, the terrain. Starting with some XPS foam. I'll use this tiny and not very stable hot wire cutter to get the shape of the land. Wear a mask if you do this. Then I just start hacking and slashing it until it starts to look like rock and earth. Carving a nice dip in the center for the flowing river. More on that in a minute. For now, we are making a texture paste, using some very fine gravel, hobby dirt, white glue, baking soda, Mod Podge, and some cheap craft paint. Spreading that all over every surface before we begin the painting process. My idea for this diorama was for sort of a spontaneous and unexplainable rift in time, in which these particular Space Marines happen to unexpectedly travel through, causing them to arrive in a time and place entirely different than their own, suddenly finding themselves facing a very large and territorial alien creature standing menacingly across a flowing river. Every party is confused and very capable of causing serious bodily harm. The creature is heavily armored, with dense bone matter plating all over the exterior of its head and body, a sharp bone horn extruding from the middle of its forehead, and the Space Marines are, well, Space Marines. Yeah, they're going to tear this thing apart. But this thing definitely puts up a good fight in my version of things, which this is. Also, it allows for me to create my own thing rather than recreate a scene tied down creatively to the very deep and pretty awesome, if I may add, Warhammer lore. The setting is a prehistoric and seemingly strange and alien world. Almost desert-like, with sparse greenery spread atop the sandy and rocky ground, contrasted by the flowing waters of small rivers running through the large valleys of Red Rock Mountains. Think Land of the Lost meets Star Trek. I would say it's probably a bit of an upgrade from whatever the hell is outside the monasteries these Space Marines are unfortunate enough to reside in. Look at that, an impromptu Space Marine luxury vacation. Alright, next up, an oil wash. Using some brown oil paint and mineral spirits, brushing it all over the terrain, making sure it gets deep into every crack and all the recesses. Then wiping away the excess with a paper towel to make it look more earthly and dirty, bringing it all together. Next up, some of that sparse greenery on the ground. Using some static tack, spread it on the spots that I want to lay that down on. Normally I would just destroy an older shitty brush for this, but I already had this glove on. Sprinkle my static grass on top of it. Now for that flowing river I've been going on about. Starting by sealing off the river with some plastic. I just use these trading card top loaders I had lying around. I have a ton of them. You know, because Pokemon. Sealed with a bit of some UV resin to make sure there's no leaks. Using 2-part epoxy resin for this. Looking back, I should have added a tiny bit of color to the resin, but what are you gonna do? I probably could have shot this a lot cooler, now that I'm thinking about it. Using a coffee stirrer to avoid some bubbles, not all. I wanted to make it look a little off. Like, it looks like nice clear water for the most part, but you wouldn't want to go drinking it. It is a strange and alien planet after all. Then I brushed some UV resin on top of the epoxy to get some ripples. Then I added some more paint to the rim because the UV resin I used to seal off the river took that with it. Next up, a little more of that sparse greenery in the form of some green grass tufts. And that's our terrain complete. Now let's paint some minis. Now at this point I realized this was taking a while. Between making and painting the terrain and for resin to dry and kit bashing that little monster and knowing I have to edit and make this all a relatively entertaining video, I had to be a little quicker on the models than I would have hoped. Don't get me wrong, I love how the finished piece came out cohesively. I just wish I could have spent a little bit more time on the models, especially the Space Marines. That's what this whole thing was about. I got a little carried away with all the other stuff. That being said, I love how the monster turned out. Starting out with the base coat of a really dark, deep purple using the airbrush. Right before a dry brushing of bone white using a very cheap makeup brush to catch all those raised areas. Especially the ribs and the bone plating on its back. You know, I kind of love how it looks already. I almost don't want to paint over it. But no, I must.
For the Emperor!
Also, it would look like absolute shit plopped in the middle of that very colorful terrain. But if I was just doing this model, I would maybe do some highlights, a wash, maybe another layer, and call it good and grimdark. Maybe with some sort of black and white painted background. That would look pretty sick. Anyway, focus. I wanted to go with a brighter but dirty goblin-y green for the skin tone. No offense to all my goblins out there. You know I love you. Using some moot green from Citadel for the skin. I absolutely loved this shade of green and knew it would be perfect for my alien dinosaur skin. After a couple layers of that, then I moved on to adding a lighter bone white over the skull, those bone spikes coming out of its face, and its exterior rib cage. Then I added this red stripe across the skull. Not even realizing at the time that it reminds me of Kratos. Whatever, I'll take it. I gotta say, as much as I loved the black and white version of it, I love how this turned out. I think it looks pretty awesome. I think it'll look right at home in that colorful and alien looking world I created for it. Alright, now moving right on over to painting these Space Marines. I want these guys to look dirty and dusty. Who knows how long they've been here? Or how many other giant alien predators they've had to face off against to get to this point. Has it been days, weeks, months? Starting with a dry brushing of white all over. I wanted to go with a mostly black accented with a darker crimson red for the power armor. I guess it would resemble a Black Templar's color scheme, which I personally think is one of the coolest looking Space Marine chapters in all of Warhammer lore. Even if I don't like their cause or motivations. If you know, you know. I painted the chapter iconography and the battlefield markings white. I guess it's also reminiscent of the Hellboomer, the robot I made in the last video as well. Please go watch it if you missed that one. It's good, I promise. I just love a black and red color scheme on armor. I just think it looks really dark and menacing, which is right up my alley aesthetically. I added the red to a few parts of the armor like the knees, arms, gloves, backpack, and pauldrons. Then I added a dark and dull metallic silver to the bolt gun and gave it a nice rusty finish with a very dark orange wash of super watered down paint. And last but not least, I painted the Imperials a metallic silver. Then I'll move on to stippling some metallics all over the power armor for some scratches and battle damage. Now I'll give everyone a bath of some dark and dirty brown oil wash to tie everything together. Make all the models more cohesive with the scenery. Now let's glue everybody on the base. Give some dirt effects to the feet of the creature, as well as the Space Marines. And there you have it, our interdimensional Space Marine diorama. Stay tuned for that glamour shot. As I previously stated, I will be revisiting this Warhammer painting thing in the future. If you notice, I only used 2 of the models. And I will be giving it the love and attention that this incredible hobby and model, as well as its really badass IP, the love and attention it definitely deserves.
I have dug my grave in the ground here. I will triumph or I will die. No mercy. No remorse. No fear.
And there you have it, the Warhammer model done. And I definitely will be back to give the whole miniature painting a more proper shot. I just kind of time ran away from me on this one. And before we get to the glamour shots, my name is Danny Peralta, and this is Diver Girl Art. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. There's plenty of new builds coming. Next, we're gonna get a little bit spooky. Follow my Instagram at Diver Girl Art for all my more traditional artwork. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next build. Let's get to those glamour shots.